Our guest today is Tom Shope, longtime owner of Shope's IGA and former Coolidge mayor. Tom was mayor for three separate stints for a cumulative total of 14 years and was on council for a total of 16 years. Tom has also been very involved in the Coolidge community, serving on the Coolidge School Board for a brief period and as the president of the Coolidge Chamber of Commerce as well. Aside from his service and political involvement, Tom was also very well known among the Coolidge community as the voice of the Bears, acting as a broadcaster and PA announcer for live games for local radio stations KCKY and KQEZ, as well as channels 11 and 19 for more than 40 years. Tom, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome. You've read all that. Can I leave now?
Yeah, right. Well, to get started today, before we kind of get into the meatier portions of our interview, one of the things I've always wondered about is what got you involved in broadcasting and PA announcing for the Coolidge Bears?
Well, I've been a sports fan all my life since the time I was a kid. Probably, not before I was a teenager. And those are back in the AM radio days. No FM, none of that stuff. So you could in those days you could pick up stations from back east. I remember WBC in Boston. It'd be fade in and out, but you could hear it. So I had, especially from the south area of the country, LSU. I get to hear all those games, and I just get excited about it. I said, I think I can do that, but. And then so you go to games here in Coolidge and all that, and that'd be the most logical place for me to do it. But, I was working at a certain age when I first got into this, and so I can't go anywhere else, So I got involved with KCKY radio. I went up and asked the guy, hey, do you need any announcers? Because they did have some, and they did Coolidge, and later on they did Casa Grande and Eloy and Florence, and kind of made it. They do two games. They tape one and they live the other one, and so I was pretty much with the Coolidge team, which where I wanted to be actually, and so they let me come on. I'm sure it had something to do with my dad being a major sponsor of the games and on advertiser on KCKY radio. I'm positive, thank you, Dad. And so we got into it that way, and it was a rough start at first, and you had to. You learn what you really need to have when you do a game, but luckily I did have guys like Tom Smith and Chuck Roberts that would help me along. They'd be my spotter or color man or for play-by-play, which is what I did. So it was, and I just kept doing it. I loved it,
Mm-hmm. And that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because as I mentioned, you did it for about over 40 years. So what made you stay for so long?
Because I enjoyed it. There's the one thing I did, I enjoyed. And like I said, I love sports, and I love doing the games, and I did a lot of things that weren't real pleasant to do, and we'll probably get into that later, but sports I actually liked, and it relaxed me. It got me away from my business. Got me away from the political stuff I was doing, and I just enjoyed doing it, and I did it up until a couple of years ago when I just, the older you get, the less I still had the same responsibilities. I had to pick and choose what I could do, so I had to give that one up, and believe me, it was the last thing I gave up, because I'm not into politics anymore. Now anyway, and you never say never. So anyway, but so that's what we did. We went from a radio station to cable TV, and then to public address announcing, which I actually found rather enjoyable. I didn't think I would, but I actually did like that.
Yeah. What did you like about that? How was it different from being a radio broadcaster?
Well, you have to keep up with the play. You have to keep up with the play. Every time something happens, you have to, for radio especially, you had to announce the action as it occurred, and one thing I always tried to do was, let the parents are all listening. And in those days it was different, the AM radio, but the parents, if they couldn't go to a away game, they were always listening. So you wanted to make sure you got the names right, and if they, who was making the tackle, who was running the ball, and all that type of thing. So we really concentrated on that, but the public address announcing, it it was really different. You can't do, and I've heard public address announcers try to do play-by-play. That doesn't work. And so I just I got into it. I liked it. It's I got to be part of the reaction of the crowd. Sometimes PA announcers can embellish the things to make to get the response from the crowd and everything. Not that I did that, but I might have a couple of times actually. But anyway, it's I just had a good time doing it.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, like I mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit about your political career.
We are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in the 1970s, you got involved in Coolidge politics. You went out for the Coolidge School Board, and then you also ended up serving a term. Is that correct?
That is correct, and let me expand on that a little bit. I just got out of college in 1970. Did not graduate after 4 years. We didn't do the 5-year plan back in those days, or 6 years, as some of them do, I guess. But we did 4 years. I ended up 2 classes short of a degree and never went back. For your information, FYI. Okay. So after that, I came back to run the family business, and then people came up to me and said, "Why don't you run for school board?" They wanted to have somebody besides. And I love agriculture, by the way, so don't take this the wrong way. This is people coming to me wanting somebody besides an ag person, on the school board, and so they said, "Yeah, you can do it. You can win this election." Yeah, okay. And I was naive. I mean, I'd never been involved in politics before. I kind of followed it, but so anyway, the person that I had to run against was a guy by the name of Howard Wirtz. There's probably not a more popular guy that has done more for his community than Howard Wirtz. And as I got into that race, I said, I'm not going to beat this guy. This is crazy. But, I learned a lot in the race and all that. And I learned how much I didn't know. And that guy was just fluid. I mean, he was fantastic. And I'm glad he won. But he's the only guy that ever beat me. I've never been beaten since. I learned a lot. But I never ran against somebody as popular and as a well-known name as he was. And in those days, ag dominated, Yeah. I was just a businessman, Who was I? And just a punk kid out of college, basically, I'm sure that's the way people looked at me, back in those days. So
How old were you at the time?
I think I was 22 or 23.
Oh, wow.
1970, I can answer that. It was 22, yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wow, so you were pretty young. You got into the game pretty young.
I was, and then after following that, as you mentioned, I was appointed by Mary C. O'Brien, who was the county school superintendent at the time, because there was an opening besides Howard on the board. Somebody resigned, and so she picked me probably because I ran and showed interest, and that's what usually happens, and she picked me to run, and boy, did I learn a lot. I had Howard Wirtz, Bobby Skousen, Ray Osborne, and guys like that on the board. I'm sure that Bob Henry was on there with me, so I learned an awful lot in those 3 or 4 years that I was on the school board, from 1973 to 1976.
Wow, yeah. And one thing I would love to know is, I know you mentioned, people had kind of come up to you expressing interest to see you run for school board, but what was like the motivating factor? What made you want to run?
Well, number one, just having people, you're kind of enthralled when people come up and ask you that, but I've always felt like, once I graduated, now I'm a businessman at Coolidge, so what do you do? And, doing what little reading I did, you should give back to the community in some way. And so that means running for office, serving on the Chamber of Commerce, whatever it is. And so that's one reason I did it. I felt a need to serve. I felt I could do it as good as anybody. I found out there was a lot more to learn than I knew. Don't get me wrong, but so we did that, and I just had that feeling, the need to serve. And my dad, I think, had just been elected to the city council. That might have influenced a little bit of that need to serve thing. Now, I was warned. Don't run for elective office. You got a business, it'll hurt you. And dadgummit, they were right. It did hurt. There's no doubt about it. But I couldn't let that kind of mentality, drive my future and everything, and my belief in what we should be doing as business people. Getting involved in the community, whether it's serving on boards or actually running for political office. There's still people to this day that won't run for office if they have a business because it could hurt them, and it does hurt. There's no doubt about it. People don't forget, and if you do, you might agree with them 99 out of 100 times, but the one time they will remember.
Yeah.
And it did cost me. I still have people that don't talk to me from the city council days. Yeah. So.
But it's interesting you mentioned that. So for you, you said as a business person, you think it's important. And could you speak to that a little bit more? Why do you think it's so important that business people within a community take on service roles like that?
Well, I don't want it to sound egotistical or anything like that, but number one, most of the business people, they have an investment in the community. They have some of them very large investment in the community. So not that you need to protect that investment. That's not the point. It's just that they generally have a well-rounded, more rounded thing than just a person off the street that wants to run. And there's nothing wrong with other people running. I mean, I don't mean it that way, but there's sometimes you get people running for office that don't really know why they've got one issue. They don't know why they're running. They're just running, to be up there and sometimes raise a little bit of cane. And I mean, you see it in all your meetings, especially nowadays. You see people just raising heck in meetings and all that. And some of them just step forward and runs. Most of them don't, And but so I just felt like I had a little bit more to offer as a business person. Somebody just got out of college and all that. Maybe that was pie in the sky thinking on my part, but that time that's what I felt. Yeah.
And so from going from a proactive role on the school board, you then eventually decided to run for council and eventually became mayor.
Yes.
I'd love to learn a little bit more because, as you said, there are some drawbacks of running for political office. So what was your thinking when you decided, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna go for council as well?
Well, the longer you're in the community and you've already done school board things, so you kind of know what the issues are, what's happening in your community. I wanted to see the city grow. Not that I didn't think the leaders at the time wanted that, but we had a history in Coolidge of kind of stunting growth a little bit. Now I'm going back to the 60s and all that, but I didn't want to be a part of that. I wanted to see this community grow. I wanted to help people, and that's pretty much why I ran. And there may have been an issue or two at the time that I was a little disappointed in how they acted. I can't remember, but that does happen sometimes. And I ran 3 different times for council, and I know once or twice I said, if I'm going to sit here and complain about something, I'm no different than anybody else that gets to council meetings and complains about an issue. I'm going to do something about it. The first time, well, it was more, I think I can do this, and I am, I do want to see my city grow and do whatever is best for the city, disregarding my business interests or my own business, because I know it's going to hurt. And there were decisions, every time you raise sewer fees and stuff like that, it's going to hurt your business, because we pay a lot more than the residential customer does. But I had to make a few of those decisions that hurt.
And so you started out as a council member, and then you eventually made the leap to mayor. What made you decide, I want to do this, I want to be mayor?
Gosh, part of it was probably ego. I hate to admit that. I'm embarrassed to even say that. Part of it, I knew I could do it. And so I just thought I could do as good or better job than the mayor at the time. I don't remember who that was. Well, I sort of do, but that's all right. That's not important. But just thought I could do it. 2 years on the council groomed me to be that, actually, and I had a lot of support going in. Obviously, I wasn't going to run it if people didn't like me. So I decided to run. Thought maybe I could help even more that way. Better the community. And we had a lot of issues. Going back to all my years as mayor. We were either in a slight recession or whatever. We did the best we could with what we had financially. We never were a community that had money. Now all of a sudden that's changed, obviously, with the growth we've had and the Nikola coming in and other items like that coming in. So a whole different world, really.
Yeah. And from your time as mayor, what would you say are the 2 biggest lessons you learned?
Well, I kind of already referred to it, but one is people, you're not going to make everybody happy. Just not going to do that, And so when they're not, one of my biggest disappointments was when people don't agree with a decision. They don't talk to you anymore. They hate you, and a lot of them do. now some there's some very good people out there that they understand you have a hard choice to make, and they still will get along with you. But a lot of people are not like that, and even at that time, you say, yeah, nowadays it's certainly true, but even in that time, I've got people that still won't talk to me over the closing of the alleys issue. That's been over 10 years now, I think. Stuff, just things like that are important issues to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the community overall, it was a wise thing to do, you know. And so that's one thing. I'm sure there's others, but
and so of course you're someone who's been very proactive in the Coolidge community, and I'm curious if there's a message you could give to younger Coolidge generations. Of course, you have a son, TJ, who's also very involved in the Pinal County community. And I'm curious, if there's something a message you could give to other Pinal County residents about the importance of being involved, whether it's in politics or in service, what would it be?
Well, first of all, as far as my son goes, he's followed me from the time he was reading newspapers at 5 years old, and then watching. When I resigned, I think it was in 1990, might have been 1998. He was real upset at me. He wanted to watch and learn from me, on there. So I didn't tell him what I was doing beforehand. He was still pretty young. But anyhow, he let me know in certain terms for a small child that I shouldn't have done that. And of course, he doesn't understand the business pressures either, which is, and I can get into that in a second too. But as far as young people, I mean, we have elected a couple of young people on a school board. In fact, I think the last, or maybe 2 elections ago, we elected a very young person on the Coolidge School Board, and then also on the City Council, same election, I think Jeff Jackson, when he was here, asked me, do you have any problem with that? I said, well, why would I have a problem with it? They step forward and run, and they're interested in serving the community. I never would have a problem with that, So, they'll have a lot to learn, but any adult that gets on there, if they haven't done it before or been involved in boards or something like boards and commissions of the city, they're going to have a problem. There's a learning curve there, But no, I just think young people have fresh ideas, and I mean, you have to sort of filter it out and see, hey, are these radical ideas or overly conservative ideas? Because young people are both either way, They can either go far left or far right, and I don't think either way helps the community out, So I like to see a kind of a middle ground thought in there and let people hash out in decent, good discussion, the issues so they can make better decisions. Not always the case now.
Yeah, that's understandable. And you mentioned, so back in 1998 when you decided to not run again, that TJ was very upset with you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say he was one of the motivating factors why you decided to run again eventually?
Well, it was 98, so that was, and then I ran again, 8 years later, I think, and won it, and that took a while. Every time I have resigned, it's been because of business, Business got overwhelming, and I just didn't have time, so I decided to leave. And then some people didn't appreciate that either. They figured they elected me, why don't you stay on? Mm-hmm. I always wanted to,
Yeah.
I didn't want to resign the last time, even at my age. I wanted to stay on and finish my term as a judge and everything. But I also had a business to run, and we were just overwhelmed there. I could see it, and I knew I needed to get back. But so that's pretty much what happened there.
Yeah. And then just a couple more questions for you,
Sure.
Tom. Do you think you'll ever get back into politics?
I'm pretty old now. It's, I will say here, I think everybody in the community knows that my business is up for sale. I cannot, people come to me and say, what are you leaving for? I said, well, I'm 73 years old. Don't you want me to have a life? I mean, I like to go travel. I like to do something. Seriously. And so, it is up for sale. And, I don't have family that's interested in it, nor would I want my son or my daughters to take over such an operation and everything. 7 days a week gets old after a while, It's not always like that, but many times you're always on call. Mm-hmm. And many times you do have to serve those 7 days. So I would, I never say never, I said I wouldn't run before, and then I ended up running, So I could, Am I looking, is that a possibility? No, I want to take care of this one, the potential sale, and then I can sit back and look at what life looks like, in the future going forward.
Awesome, thank you. And then one last question. We've been asking some of our guests this, and I would love to hear your perspective on it as well. What do you think are the key secrets to creating a thriving community here in Pinal County?
Secrets?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Are there secrets? What are preventing them from a thriving county or
Creating a thriving.
Creating a thriving, yeah. Okay. I just think the ability to work together on issues, being open-minded. There's been a little criticism recently about the expansion of a power plant south of town. I was mayor when that first went in, okay? So if the people around want to beat me up for it, yes, it was my decision. I wasn't aware at the time of all the issues they might go through over it. I thought we covered that pretty well. Nobody objected at the time, and they're included. They were involved in some discussions. I'll give them credit for that, but they didn't really object to it. And so you just welcome these individuals in to talk. You always got to create an open mind. If you have a closed mind to people like that, then nobody's going to come and talk to you, because the word gets out among the industrial community or the business community that we're not too receptive here. So I just think keep an open mind, keep it working forward. Before I left the last time, we had people come in and that eventually bought the land for the Nikola operation south of town, and so we welcomed them with open arms. But the time I left, I didn't know if there was anything ever really going to happen, except that they had a track record in Cass Granny and some of their industrial areas out there.
And that would have been St. Holdings, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
So it was. They were great people to work with. Unfortunately, I wish I'd have never had to leave, because now all of a sudden it's grown, But kudos to the current council for moving forward with it and working with these folks on that. It's been a boon to the community, and hopefully everything works out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate
You're
your
welcome.
time.
Okay.
Thank you.